This episode of Writing Excuses has been brought to you by our listeners, patrons, and friends. If you would like to learn how to support this podcast, visit www.patreon.com/writingexcuses.
As you may or may not know, I started my journey to being one of the hosts on Writing Excuses by going on the Writing Excuses cruise. And while, to be honest, I can't promise that for you, I can promise that you go on the cruise this year, you'll have a lot of fun. The entire cast of Writing Excuses will be there. We'll be sailing from Los Angeles on the Navigator of the Seas from September 19th to 27th. And we're going to stop in 3 places we've never been to before: Ensenada, Cabo San Lucas, and Mazatlan. The cruise has seminars, lectures, exercises, group sessions, group dinners, partying. It's just everything you want, all in one big package. Relaxation, learning, and writing, all while sailing the Mexican Riviera. For tickets and more information, visit writingexcuses.com/retreats.
Season 19, Episode 33. This is Writing Excuses.
Workshops and retreats.
I'm Mary Robinette.
I'm Erin.
And I'm Dongwon.
And we're joined by our 2 guests today, Sandra Taylor and Sarah Sward. We've invited them because they are both extremely experienced with retreats, both as participants, and Sarah is one of the people who puts together our land-based retreats. So, what we wanted to talk to you today, we're going to talk about 2 things. First, we're going to talk about the difference between workshops and retreats. And then the second part of the episode, we're going to talk about how to put one together so that if you want to put together a workshop or retreat, you know some of the tools that you need to do that. So what's the difference? Workshop, retreat? Erin, you go to these constantly.
I would say workshops usually have some sort of curriculum. That's the main thing. Like, you're actively learning on some level. That's what I think about. When I go to a workshop, I'm expecting someone to either teach me in a class format or to be workshopping my work with other people. But there is sort of I'm going to come out of this with more knowledge, whether it's general knowledge or knowledge about the actual piece that I'm working on, because both of those can be workshops. Whereas retreats are a little bit more about being your creative self and sort of letting yourself guide what you're doing day to day, as opposed to letting the workshop guide what you're doing from moment to moment. Does that make sense?
A retreat is really more about giving a writer or another creative person space and time and usually like a nice setting in which to get some work done for whatever reason. Whether it's just getting away from your busy life at home, whether it's just getting time away from work, versus the workshop, which is much more educational in its structure and has much more structure generally.
But I think that one of the things about both of them is that you are going to be with a community. It is very rare that you're going to go to a retreat that is by yourself. That's well, you can do it. It's more of, I'm going to a hotel, but you don't necessarily call it a retreat. There is a community aspect that I think comes from both of those. Sandra and Sarah, I'm curious what you think about when you're thinking about community and that experience at a workshop or retreat.
I think for me, at least, that's sort of one of the goals or one of the benefits of them is that you're, like you said, you can go do something by yourself if you just need to rest and recharge or you need to focus on your work. But if you're going to a workshop or retreat, one of the aspects that is going to be there is other people. And so that can you can use that to push you forward and help you and encourage you or learn things if it's more workshop focused.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is really powerful about both workshops and retreats is the way that it churns up whatever's in your head creatively. It will churn up and create new ideas and and if you are the kind of person who squirrels off into multiple projects, it will absolutely do that to you a little bit. But sometimes it isn't about the productivity of what you create during the retreat. It is about how you have shifted everything in your brain that then settles out and changes what happens in the month after.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thinking about the difference in community between workshop and retreat, I was suddenly thinking about boating, as you do. And so I was thinking,
Of course.
in a workshop, you're sort of, it's like you're all in a rowboat together rowing, because ultimately you're either learning, you're in the same classes, you're workshopping each other's work. There's a little bit of a like, we're all pulling together. And being in a retreat is a little bit like a whole bunch of people in kayaks who are all on the same river, and you can see each other and wave because you're maybe all working on different projects, but like you come together for dinner, or you know that person's there. And so you're feeling the creativity. You don't all have to be going in the same direction, but there's a feeling that there are other people out there with you.
Love it.
I was also going to say, there also are combinations of the two. I don't want us to set us up that you can only have one or the other, especially as writing excuses. Ours tend to be a combination where try to give that time for the retreat. Everyone does their own project, but also have the workshop encouragement time open for those who want to go to that. And I think there's others that do something similar.
Well, one thing that I see sometimes in retreats is group activities that aren't necessarily about education or moving your main work forward, right? So there's a retreat called Wayward that's a really beautiful retreat that takes place in British Columbia, where they do a lot of communal art projects over the course of the week, where they sort of share in creative practice and learn from each other in an organic way that's not pedagogical, it's not hierarchical. There's no teacher being like, here's how you do things. There's no one leading a critique group. So the feeling is more of a retreat, even though there's a lot of shared learning and shared connection around creative process. It's deliberately multidisciplinary, so people are learning from all kinds of different practices.
And I think the thing that both have in common is that it's about filling that well.
Yeah.
And so when you see these group activities, it's usually something that is around filling the well, recharging in some way, and giving you a break from the focus, if you're at a retreat, of working on your piece, that it's very easy to fatigue yourself and then you don't get anything done, or you put so much pressure on yourself that you can't get anything done.
And one of the things I would advise to people who are coming to a retreat, especially if you're like an introverted writer by any chance, open yourself up to some of these group activities, even if your brain and maybe social anxiety say, no, I don't want to do that group thing. The organizers will have planned this on purpose for a reason. That they may or may not tell you the whole reason of it. And if you are willing to embrace the communal nature, you will gain things that you will be surprised that you gain.
I find that when I go into situations like this, that one of the frames that I got very early was, what is one thing that I can learn today?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't actually have to be out of the curriculum. It can be from conversation with anyone else. It can be from going for a walk by myself, but just opening myself up to looking for what is the thing I'm learning today, helps me be in a more receptive mode as I'm in these places.
I love that.
Yeah. I'm like,
in my mind, I always think of it as a secondary objective, but the way you said it was so much more lovely.
I was sitting here thinking, I learned a thing today.
I also think you can be honest with the organizers, like something, and we'll get into sort of how you organize these things. But if you are feeling like, I do want to be part of this group, but I'm afraid, or I feel anxious, or I'm worried about this group activity because it's something that I don't love doing, talking to the folks and saying, here's where I'm coming up on a block, or here's what I'm trying to get out of this, and I feel like I'm missing what you're trying to deliver to me, I think can be really great, because sometimes, for one thing, it helps to voice what's going on in your head to another person. And also they may be able to, within reason, like adjust what's going on, or explain why something is important, or say, actually, this may not be as much of a lift as you think it is because you're imagining it to be X, but actually it's Y.
How do you all prep for going to a workshop or a retreat? Like, what's the process for you when you're planning on going to one? You know, whether that's is something as simple as packing or just mental prep for entering that experience.
For me, I try to have some intentionality to it. And this is not necessarily the same as I'm going to do 2,000 words a day, but that my goal, and I will, let me back up and say that I used to do that. I used to have these very rigid metrics of what I was going to try to accomplish. And that what I find is more effective now is to recognize that rigid metric was an externalization of my actual goal. and that my actual goal was to move forward in my project. And that sometimes that is 2,000 words a day, but sometimes that is having time to sit and think about it and getting some clarity. And so again, it's, one thing. So I'll think, 3 sentences. I set my bar as low as I can going in so that I feel like I have success when I come out, since one of the primary motives for going to these is to feel recharged, is to feel that well. And if I set myself up for failure by having goals that are too lofty that I'm not going to hit, that's the opposite of recharging.
I will say that anytime I go to a workshop or retreat, I overpack.
Yeah.
And it's an anxiety control mechanism for me. I'm an anxious person. I have food restrictions, and so I will bring snacks with me so that I know that no matter what, I can go grab a granola bar, and I know I'm in control of that granola bar. It is mine whenever I need it, and then I can be less anxious about all the rest of the food because I know I'm not going to starve because I have a section of suitcase to make sure that I won't. That level of, depending on what your anxiety is, pack extra clothes if in case you're worried of cold, or pack extra books. I always bring like 3 more books than it's physically possible for me to read. And so
I don't know what you're talking about. I've never done that.
Yeah, no,
None of us ever have.
never. But like recognizing that taking yourself out of the space that you're used to could be anxious and could churn up emotions that you didn't realize were there. And again, being willing to roll with that and talk to your organizers and figure out. That's one of the ways that I prep.
I also, going off of both those ideas and Mary Robinette's as well, I try to almost temper my mental expectations where because sometimes you can be like, oh, this is going to be the most amazing experience I've ever had. And it's not, probably. I mean, it might be, but there's only so many most amazing experiences of your life out there. So if you can kind of be like, this is going to be a good experience. What do I want to get out of this? And what are some expectations that you can mentally sort of work through, even if you're writing them down, just to mentally prep yourself so you're not disappointed, or if something goes wrong, you're not immediately spiraling.
Yeah. One of the things that you should be aware of when you go to a workshop or a retreat is that you will have to go home afterwards. And your mood may spiral after that because you were so productive when you were gone, and then it's hard when you get home. So being aware that this is a very common experience, I think, will help. We see this all the time, that someone will go to a workshop or go to a retreat and they come home and then never write again. So know that it's normal for writing to feel hard because you are coming back, and at the retreat you can experiment with what makes writing easier for you and see if you can bring that into home in small measures. And after the break, we're going to talk about how to thoughtfully design these spaces to make them as productive as possible for the people who attend.
All right, our thing of the week this week is actually a category of things. I want to recommend to you solo RPGs. Solo role-playing games are becoming a much bigger force in the role-playing game market these days, and there are many, many of them. I can recommend in particular Strider Mode, which is from the One Ring role-playing game. Star Trek Adventures has a really incredible one. There are also kind of settingless solo RPGs, like one called Mythic Game Master. What these all have in common is that they are essentially tools and random tables that help you to come up with story ideas on your own. They're incredibly useful tools for writers, and I use them in my writing all the time. Mythic Game Master in particular. There's dozens, if not hundreds, of tables you can roll on to give ideas for characters, for plots, for twists, for all of these different elements that might pop up that you might need to think of during storytelling. So check them out.
So let's talk about running retreats, which is one of the reasons we're like, Sarah, you're here with us. Writing Excuses, as you all probably know, runs retreats. We do one on a boat every year, and then we also do land-based retreats as well. All of us individually also have interests in retreats and workshops, and they don't have to be the big formal things that we do. There's a bunch of different things that you can do, but all of them have some pretty common things that you need in order to be effective. So let's talk a little bit about some of the common things that you have at these workshops and retreats that you have to think about before people arrive.
Yes. I mean, obviously there's the logistics, but even before you start getting into the logistics over where it's going to be, where people are going to sleep, what people are going to eat, I always want to start with who are the event runners, like who is the hosts specifically, like, and if it's a workshop, who are the instructors? And if it's a retreat, even then you still are going to have the hosts who are kind of the like brainchild over what the theme is or what they're hoping to accomplish as the organizer. And you always want to start there because that is going to inform the location that you want to find, what kind of sleeping arrangements you need to find for the attendees, and how the food is going to be arranged. Because that communication needs to be really clear. And if it can sometimes take a little while of back and forth. But I find in my role, I'm often just kind of like, I'm the person who's like, let's all get in a room. And then you just talk at me. And then I'm taking notes. And then I'll like make it happen.
This is very much like what Erin has talked to us about in at other points in other episodes about coming up with an artistic statement. Mm-hmm. Like, what is the purpose of this retreat? It's one of the questions we ask when we're creating fiction. Like, what is the narrative of this retreat? What is the purpose? Who is the main character? Mm-hmm. Who is our audience? What is the goal? And if you start there, like Dongwon, you run retreats that are not public facing. These are private retreats.
Mm-hmm. I mean, having an idea of what you're trying to accomplish is really helpful because it helps you manage scope creep. It's very easy to start planning too many activities and too many different things that quickly become overwhelming for people or overwhelming for the organizers. And so you do less of a good job making sure everyone's having a good experience. So I run smaller retreats for clients, and then I do some that are also with just friends. I haven't done one of the big client ones in a few years since pre-pandemic, but the thing that I quickly learned for doing those was managing a lot of expectations about what we were going to be doing at the retreat and also responsibilities. Because these are small things, I'm not running at a big center. It's either at my house or at an Airbnb or something like that. Setting expectations about shared responsibilities and tasks. What are we doing about food? Who's cleaning? Who's doing these things, right? So literally remember that you're going to be staying with other people in that making sure common spaces are clean and usable and fun are all really important things. So all those kind of expectations and things you really want to think about to make sure that you as the organizer don't become overwhelmed and that everyone is having a good time and one person isn't doing all the dishes because they're the one who thinks to do that.
I think that's where vision really comes back into play because one of the biggest things I think you're trying to do is fit the workshop or retreat to the right people for that workshop and retreat. And so when you are really clear about your vision, then you can convey that to somebody else and they can go like, oh, I actually like to live like a rock star every day, never clean. And I need a retreat where it's just me in a cabin with servants because that's what I want. And there's always a retreat for everybody. Like if you know what you want, you can usually find someone offering it. But you want to make sure that those things line up. Because when before the break, when Mary Robinette, when you were talking about coming back, having been so productive, I sort of often have the opposite experience because I tend to be a workaholic. And so
I've never noticed that about you.
I find that retreats, I'm like, what can I get out of this that I would not get out of my regular life?
Yeah.
And for me, it's like to slow down and have a conversation with someone instead of thinking about the next task. So I look for retreats and workshops that have that built in and where they're communicating to me that productivity is not the number one thing here. It's recharging.
Exactly.
Whereas somebody else might be like, I don't want all that freedom. I want a little bit more structure. So you need to figure out what you're trying to give to the participants so that you can find the right ones for you.
And with that, that is something that as people are looking for retreats, you can start to tell pretty quickly, like on the event organizing side, like look at their page, send an email, see how quickly they respond. Then you can like get an idea of how communication is going to go and then what this retreat is going to be like. And if that fits with what you're looking for. Yeah. And then on the organizer side, that I like over communication as on a personal level, which I think that is why I have heard pretty consistently I'm very good at communicating to attendees and the other hosts. And I have to tone it down when I send it out, at which I have learned over many years of okay, I need to tone this back and not send all of it in one communication, because the people who don't like over communication will miss the important things. Mm-hmm. So you try to pick like one or two really important things. And then if you have a couple other things that if the people who don't care, they can skip it. And then the more anxious or over people who want all of it, they get all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things about this communication is this intentionality of what is the experience that I want to create for someone. So even when you're doing a retreat, one of the things that I think about is, for the lack of a better word, curriculum. And I think about that before I think about the schedule, because the schedule serves the curriculum. And the curriculum is, what are we getting out of this? If this is a recharge thing, like if I've got people coming to Chattanooga, is this one of the ones where we're going to go see Rock City? What piece of the curriculum is that serving? Is it okay, this is really weird, or is that not serving it? And so I will often think about curriculum, even if it's not a class-based workshop.
Mm-hmm.
I love that expansive thought about what curriculum is, because a lot of the retreats that I go to don't have a lot of workshop time. They're very retreaty, but there's everyone gathers together for dinner is something that's really big for a lot of the retreats that I go to. And it's because they're all about hospitality. There are a few that I've been to where they're like, we're all about making sure that you're having this great experience with each other. And so our curriculum is a shared meal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It doesn't just have to be a learning experience.
A lot of ones that I do will end up all just sitting in one room while we work rather than going into separate spaces. I know many places will do that, but for ones that are more about close friends working together, we'll all be in one space. And what's delightful about that is someone will be like, hey, I'm stuck on this thing. Can I talk it through with somebody? And either those two will go off, or it'll just become a group brainstorming conversation. And I think that's really fun to see other people's process, share ideas, and go back and forth. And a lot of times if I'm hanging out with clients, sometimes they will be directly grabbing me and being like, hey, I'm thinking of this idea. Can we have like a mini strategy conversation about, where we're going from here in a really ad hoc fun way. So, there's lots of different ways to structure that, whether you're working independently or you're really sharing that learning and knowledge.
And this is getting to something else that I wanted to talk about is that I think that when you're designing one of these, that you should also be thinking about the emotional care of the people, your attendees, and how you're going to be taking care of them.
Absolutely. It is important to realize that when your attendees have packed their bags, they have also brought their emotional baggage. Whatever emotional baggage that they have around being social, around writing, about creating, about whatever, they've brought that with them, whether or not they meant to. And for some people, my very first retreat experience was almost like one long panic attack the whole time. Because
sounds so relaxing.
It was an experience, and that I'm incredibly grateful for. Because again, when I was talking about earlier, it's about that unpacking when you got home. It helped me see a dozen ways that I had bad thinking going on, and it helped me. It was hugely therapeutic in one of those very unpleasant, we did physical therapy today kinds of ways. Yeah. And I bring that up in this context because some of your attendees may have that experience. Mm-hmm. They may get there and dive into deep depression about themselves, their lives, their writing, their whatever, and building some kind of safety net around that, and some kind of way so that you don't get dragged down, because it is so easy when somebody has dived deep into depression. It's the, you don't jump in the water with the drowning person. Yeah, you have to have plans.
Yeah, and I think going along it, I think that's why a team is so important to running these. Even for smaller ones, just having one other person to tag team off of. But for larger ones, you definitely need a team, because I can be really good in one-on-one settings, but being the like caregiver, like immediate noticing if other people are emotionally in distress is not one of my like highest like skills. So having someone else there that is better at that is like really nice, because like that's their strength, and then if they need me to tag in, they can let me know. Yes.
Yeah, and that's something that we've found with writing excuses, is that having that range of people who can play to different strengths, recognizing what needs to be fulfilled. One of the things that we've also found is that transparency is super important. There is a big difference on writing excuses between when we started doing it and the way we do it now, that people would be having these experiences and they would not share it because they didn't want to rock the boat. And that allowed them to get way deeper down the spiral. But now that we're much deeper into our, this is going to be our, at least we've done them for over a decade.
Yeah.
Over a decade. At the beginning, we have a realistic conversation with all of our attendees that say, if you're having a problem, let us know. Let us know early, before it becomes something that stops you. And that often just having that release valve is enough. This is one of the reasons that having dinners is so important, so that people can just let steam out.
And I would also say, like, have a conversation with yourself as the planner.
Yeah.
Like, you are also there. And I think it can be really easy, as somebody who's done a lot of event planning in the past, you get in a mode sometimes when you're running something where you're just kind of doing tasks, making sure everyone's okay. You're very focused on the external. And then it ends and you are there with yourself, and you can crash pretty hard as a planner, just from exhaustion. And because even if you're having a great time, there's a certain amount of awareness that you have to have that you don't normally have in your life. It's sort of like the experience people had when they used Zoom for the first time during the pandemic and could see their own faces. It's a little bit of that. Like you look a little differently, and you feel and you move through the world a little differently, and being ready for that, and maybe building in some downtime afterwards to like give yourself time to just play mobile games, if you're me, is a great way to ensure that you don't burn yourself out as a planner.
Yes.
Exactly. And also, I will just say, if you're planning a retreat, don't think that, you can kind of participate with the community aspect and talking with people, but you are not going to be able to do your own work.
Yeah.
With large ones, no. With small group ones, you can, but it involves carefully curating who is coming.
Yes.
Exactly.
And clear communication with them ahead of time. Because there are people that I would 100% invite on a writing excuses one that I would never invite to a personal one, even though I am friends with them, because I know that it would not be a restful experience for me. And it's not, it has nothing to do with that person's value. It has everything to do with my expectations of what I want to accomplish.
Yeah.
So if I'm doing something where I am doing a small group thing where I need people to come to my house to body model so that I will get work done, it's like that person is the wrong person for that. I hope that we've given you a whole bunch of different things to think about. It is time for us to wrap up, and we have a little bit of homework for you.
What I want you to do is go and find 3 retreats, and find a retreat, find a workshop, find a combination, find 3 things, and then think about those expectations we were talking about and what your expectations would be for each one. And then if you're interested in going, and maybe check one out.
This has been Writing Excuses. You're out of excuses. Now go to a retreat. Writing Excuses has been brought to you by our listeners, patrons, and friends. For this episode, your hosts were Mary Robinette Kowal, Dongwon Song, Aaron Roberts, and Howard Taylor. This episode was engineered by Marshall Carr Jr.,
mastered by Alex Jackson and produced by Emma Reynolds. For more information, visit writingexcuses.com.